Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaytanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yarfa'illahu alladhina amanu minkum walladhina utul ilma darajat. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. My dear respected, most honorable elders, beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. First and foremost, we begin by thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by glorifying and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for enabling us with this unique and wonderful opportunity to congregate once again in our own homes with the sole purpose of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, glorifying and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we pray that Allah Azza wa Jal will continue to facilitate such wonderful opportunities for us in the future, inshaAllah ta'ala. We're approaching sort of we're at the midway point in the month of Ramadan now, the month is rapidly passing us by, and as you can see, we're in a different setting. I'm not in the Masjid. I'm at home visiting family in High Wycombe, and I thought to myself, today's topic is one that I've covered before in terms of my Jummah khutbahs and my Friday sermons, the Islamic contributions or Muslim contributions to the world that we live in today. The reason why we are following on to this topic is, if you had been listening to the last couple of talks that I've covered, you may have remembered a couple of days ago we spoke about dignity and pride and honor. The fact that Islam is supposed to give you honor and dignity and pride. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises up people within the religion who honor the religion by being a part of it, who give honor to Muslims by giving them a certain sense of dignity and pride. That look, not only am I a Muslim, but look, this individual here, what a great person he is. Look how accepted he is. He also is a Muslim. It's like, the state of Islam in the US, in America. You all know the story of the great Muhammad Ali, rahimahullah ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed this boxer, formerly known as Cassius Clay, who suddenly, once becoming a Muslim, inspired so many others to follow exactly the same path. Not only sportsmen, but Muslims all over the world. And it gave the reason why he became the most popular figure, possibly over the last sort of 200 to 300 years, is solely due to the fact that Muslims all over the world, people all over the world were drawn to him, right? Muslims felt akin to him. They felt this special relationship to him. And it was a beautiful sight. Those individuals who had that relationship with Muhammad Ali growing up, the amount of pride and the amount of dignity that he rahimahullah ta'ala granted Muslims or gave to Muslims. So that's why it's extremely important that when we're talking about pride and honor, pride in having a certain sense of dignity within your religion, that's the only way that you're going to make advancements to the age that you live in. That's the only way that you're going to bring about positive changes into the environments that you live in. We now live in a technological age with constant advancements being made in every field of science, every field of technology. It just feels like a new iPhone comes out and then 2 months later, you purchase it. 2 months later, 3 months later down the line, the 11, the 12, the 13, and it's going to carry on going. Constant advancements are continuing to be made. The world is progressing at a rapid rate. And unfortunately, and I say this with a heavy heart, the most notable technological and scientific advancements in recent times that have contributed significantly into shaping the modern world as we see it and we live in it today have been brought about by non-Muslims in the West. And even sadder than that is the fact that these advancements that have been made by non-Muslims living in the West, and Muslims have not really had that much, have not had that much of a role to play in them. They were only made possible due to the Muslim advancements being made in the past. Hundreds of years ago, Muslims, Muslim philosophers, Muslim scientists, Muslim biologists, Muslim sociologists, all of these individuals, they contributed to shaping the modern world as we see and live in it today. The notable Muslim breakthroughs and advancements that are being made still, those few individuals, few Muslims who are still working and making those advancements in the fields of science and technology, are often not even highlighted, and that gives the impression to the mass public that Islam is somehow ignorant and is incompatible with the modern world, and this in turn, what it results in, it dents the pride of the Muslims. It dents their pride in their faith. You know, and I know so many individuals out there who are afraid to profess their faith openly. Why is that the case? Because they've lost their pride and their dignity within their own religion. It's resulted in them becoming even more ill-informed as to what their religion is and how their religion seeks to inspire. And they've completely, not only have they forgotten, I'm not going to say they've forgotten, they have absolutely no idea. And there'll be people out there who are watching today who will have absolutely no idea that so many medical, scientific, technological advancements that are only possible today happened because of the work of Muslim scientists and Muslim scholars and Muslims technicians who existed in the past. In his recent article, a popular anti-Islam blogger and activist, Sam Harris, who you may have heard of, he's a popular critic of Islam. He referred to Malala Yousafzai, and you know Malala Yousafzai too, the Pakistani education activist who has gained fame and notoriety here in the West. He said about Malala that Malala is the best thing to come out of the Muslim world in 1,000 years. And hidden in this comment is the idea that Malala's fellow Muslims are backward and that her religion, Islam, is not conducive to change or progress. And this is an absolutely ridiculous statement and clearly shows ignorance on the part of these kind of activists to malign Islam and malign the Muslims and downplay the advancements that have only been made possible on the backs of the work of those Muslim scholars of the past. Our rich heritage has now been completely hidden, and there is a real effort to brush it under the carpet. And I'll give you a simple example. You know, when a non-Muslim does something that is praiseworthy, it's everywhere. People will it will be shared on every single page, and people will be commenting, and we Muslims will be drawn into the same furor, right? So we're going to be saying, oh well, wow, that's amazing, if only Muslims did the same thing. But yet when Muslims do it, it's, oh well, okay, it's not given the same amount of publicity because people don't want to publicize the fact that Muslims are doing something positive and Muslims are being inspirational, because perhaps maybe out of that people might change their opinion of Islam. They might think to themselves, well, actually, it's their religion that teaches them, because as Muslims we attribute everything to our faith in Allah. We attribute everything to our iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's why I feel there's a concerted effort to hide all of those the majority of those advancements that have been made by Muslims. Just an example, just recently there was an elderly gentleman who was doing something noble. He was raising money for the homeless and for the vulnerable in society. And what he was doing, he was walking around his his garden, or walking a certain amount, a certain amount every single day, and raising money for those noble charitable causes. And that was highlighted when he was a non-Muslim. It was highlighted. Recently, we hear now of a Muslim elderly gentleman who is older. He's 100 years old, and he walks. Not only does he walk more, but he was walking in the state of fasting while he was fasting at the age of 100. And this is something that we younger Muslims should surely seek inspiration from, because there's people out there who got a little bit of a cough or something happens. I'm not talking about those who are genuinely ill. I'm talking about some small minor illnesses. And I'm not going to fast. I need to take my antibiotics, and I need to do this, and I'm not physically fit enough to fast. Here's a 100-year-old gentleman. Not only is he fasting, he's walking and he's raising money for charity, and that's admirable. However, what you may have noticed is that his story wasn't highlighted enough, and that's what I'm talking about. That conversely to the beliefs of people like Sam Harris and others like him, Muslims who make these enormous contributions to civilization, and Muslims have been making massive contributions. They're constantly being ignored, and people are not realizing, and we Muslims don't realize ourselves, that is due to the heavy emphasis that Islam places on education, due to the heavy emphasis that Islam plays on acting in accordance with the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being kind, being courteous, being compassionate, and people often either forget or blatantly ignore the major trends or events in world history, and it's a type of historical amnesia that we suffer when we forget about the Muslim contributions of the past. And I hope with this short talk, I've got about 20 minutes, 25 minutes left, I can highlight just some, not all, just some of those notable achievements that Muslims have made in the past, that we now, today, living in the world that we live in, the technological and scientific age that we live in, we are indebted deeply to those Muslims of the past. Muslims, when we talk about, first and foremost, someone like Malala Yousafzai, who has been used as a puppet by many individuals to highlight atrocities taking place in certain regions of Pakistan. Whereas it does happen, and where it does happen, we Muslims are the first to speak out against it, because stifling education is one of the worst things as a Muslim that we can do. Education is something that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam 1400 years ago says, "Talabul ilmi faridatun ala kulli muslimin wa muslimatin," that the seeking of knowledge is incumbent, it's a farida, it's an obligation upon every single male and female individual. So stifling that is contrary to our rich heritage and our teachings. And I'll tell you how it's contrary to our heritage. We've got a long and proud history in the field of education. Two Muslim women, Fatima and Miriam al-Firhi, they're the ones who created the world's first university. And according to UNESCO and the Guinness Book of World Records, and you can search this up yourself, the Qarawiyyin University in Fez in Morocco was established in 859 AD. 859 AD. Shortly thereafter, it was followed by the second oldest and currently the oldest surviving university in the world, a university that I've had the honor of graduating from and spending my time there, the most renowned and Islamic institution in the world, al-Azhari, which was established about 120-30 years later in 972 AD, built during the Caliphate of Al-Mu'izz. These are the first two universities, first two centers of education in the world, and they were light years ahead of what was being offered in the non-Muslim world. Whereas the non-Muslim world was surrounding was surrounded by darkness, and even that time period is called are referred to as the Dark Ages. The Muslims brought that light. Fatima al-Firhi, a woman. Maryam al-Firhi, two women established the first university in Qarawiyyin, in Fez. Al-Azhar University. Who was it named after? It's named after Fatimatu Zahra radiyallahu ta'ala anha. Women, whereas women here in the UK where we live, the advanced Western society that we live in, that we're so proud of, Muslim women weren't even allowed to vote in the West up until the mid-20th century. And yet Muslim women were establishing, not studying in, not only providing education, they were establishing centers of learning over 1,000 years ago. So what the hell is Sam Harris talking about? No, what is he on about? The best thing to come out into the world in 1,000 years. 1,000 years ago, over 1,000 years ago, Muslim women were establishing centers of learning. And for several years, students were schooled in a plethora of different sciences, secular and religious subjects. At the end of their education, the teachers evaluated students. They awarded degrees based upon satisfactory performances. And the concept of awarding degrees would spread from Fez, from the Qarawiyyin University. It would spread to Andalusia in Spain, and later to the universities of Bologna in Italy, and then to Oxford here in the UK, among other places of learning. So this standard of education that we take so pride in, that was taken from Islam. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is so that we as Muslims, we first and foremost need to take great pride in our rich cultural heritage, especially in relation to education. The Spanish Muslims of Andalusia were especially strong advocates of education. They helped to dispel the gloom that had enveloped Europe during the Dark Ages. And between the 8th and 15th centuries, when Europe was enveloped in the Dark Ages, Andalusia was perhaps the world's epicenter for education and knowledge. Spanish universities such as those in Cordoba, Granada, Seville had Christian and Jewish students as well as Muslims who learned science from Muslims. Women were also encouraged to study in Muslim Spain. This is going back 6-7 centuries. The educational environment that stressed this level of tolerance, where everybody was treated equally, where people from different faiths would come together and they would study together for one sole purpose, and that was to increase in their knowledge. This wouldn't reach the Western world until the early 20th century. And even today, in some places, that bias still exists today. Let's move on to philosophy. One of the greatest Muslim contributions to civilization began in the 8th century when Muslim scholars, they inherited the great volumes of work from the Greek philosophers. Now, the Greek philosophers who had done outstanding work in their field, that work wasn't able to reach the rest of the world due to the fact that people didn't understand the language, and their art, their work would have been lost had it not been for Muslims who translated those books and their philosophical works from Latin to Arabic, and then from Arabic it was translated to other languages, thus creating one of the greatest transmissions of knowledge in all of world history. Muslim scholars would eventually bring those ideas of Socrates and Aristotle and Plato to Europe. You know, those philosophers and scientists that we take great pride in, or Western scientists and Western philosophers take great pride in, it was only made possible. Their work reaching Western Europe was only made possible by Muslims who translated those works first from Latin to Arabic and then to the European languages that existed at the time. This is why Muslims are at the main threshold behind the European Renaissance and the Enlightenment, which took place in France. Two movements that resurrected Greek philosophy and gave new life to the European continent that was bogged down with religious dogma, with bloody internal conflicts that existed. And for those of you who know your history, Europe was enveloped in war until the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Now that was only made possible by Muslims also. Many Muslim scholars made acquiring knowledge their life goal. You need not look further than the likes of al-Ghazali, a Sufi Muslim who in the 11th and 12th centuries, he revolutionized early Islamic philosophy. He developed Neoplatonism, which is often described as the mystical or religious interpretation of Greek and Latin philosophy. You can continue on to other scientists and philosophers like Ibn Khaldun, another one of the most important and greatest Muslim thinkers in history, recognized as one of the greatest historians ever and the founder of sociological sciences in the 14th and 15th centuries. Ibn Khaldun, he created one of the earliest non-religious philosophies in history in his work, the Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. He also paved the way for our expectations of modern day presidents and modern day prime ministers, modern day rulers, by creating the framework for evaluating good leaders and good leadership. He stated this, and he stated this 600 years ago. He said that the sovereign exists only for the good of the people. The necessity of a ruler arises from the fact that human beings have to live together, and unless there is someone to maintain order, society would break to pieces. Hundreds of years later, the Americans, when America was established, the charters that were drawn up, everything was based. The Western democracy was based upon some of the work or the path that Ibn Khaldun paved. Throughout the golden era of Islamic Renaissance, or Muslim thinkers and Muslim philosophers, Arabic became the language. Arabic was at one time the language of science. It was a language of advancements. For example, when we talk about, for those of you who have studied philosophy or science, you know Maimonides. And Maimonides was a great Jewish scholar who was a student of the great Andalusian Ibn Rushd, who wrote his most significant work in the Arabic language. Ibn Rushd, who Avicenna and Averroes, he was the one who revived the work of Aristotle, who revived the works of Plato and Socrates and brought them to the West. Maimonides studied them from Ibn Rushd. In terms of mathematics, the numbers that we use today, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 0, they were all Arabic numbers originally, learned from the Indians, taught by the Indians. Muslim mathematicians brought them to Europe at around the 12th century, which revolutionized the study of mathematics and science. The zero is something that has been designed. The Roman numeral system as it exists today did not have a symbol for the zero. It was Muslim scholars who derived zero as the derivative from the Arabic word sifr. Algebra, a subject that you and I hated studying in school, one of quite possibly the worst subjects to study, and it's incredibly difficult for some people. For me, it definitely was. For that, we have to thank a Muslim mathematician, Muhammad ibn Abu Musa al-Khwarizmi, who lived from 780 to 850. In his book Hisabul Jabr wal Muqabala, which was translated to Latin into the 12th century, and was the most important mathematical text in Europe for the next 400 to 500 years. Al-Jabr translated to algebra. When you talk about contributions, and this is why I want to move on to healthcare very quickly, because a lot of the discussion recently has been around the NHS and healthcare providers, and we take great pride in our healthcare here in the UK. I remember when our loved ones were stuck in their countries, whether they were in Pakistan, India, in the Arab world, wherever they were, and we were constantly thinking about how they would come back, because we were saying to ourselves, well, at least here, if they were to fall ill here, we've got the NHS and we've got a fantastic health service that can provide them with the best quality of healthcare that is available. Whereas in our countries, Muslim countries, that type of healthcare doesn't exist. Medicine is another crucial contribution to civilization, which was made by Muslims in addition to education and the university system. In 1872 in Cairo, in Egypt, Ahmed ibn Tulun created the first hospital, and it was equipped with a elaborate institution and which offered a range of functions. The first hospital was built by Muslims in 872 in Cairo, in Egypt. Tulun was a secular institution open to men, women, adults, children, the rich and poor, as well as Muslims and non-Muslims. And it was the earliest hospital not only to care for those who were physically ill, it would care for those who were mentally ill as well. It had, in essence, the psych ward was created by Muslims well over 1,000 years ago. 100 years after the founding of Tulun, a surgeon who was called al-Zahrawi, who is often referred to now as the father of surgery, he wrote an illustrated encyclopedia that would ultimately be used as a guide for the European surgeons for the next 500 to 600 years. And it was Zahrawi's surgical instruments, such as the scalpel, the bone saws, and the forceps, that are still used by modern surgeons today. They were created over 1,000 years ago. Those same tools that are used in their same form today were created by Muslim scientists. The first scientist to identify contagious diseases like measles was Ar-Razi of Persia, who lived between 824 and 932 AD, known in the West as Rhazes. He wrote extensively about philosophical and medical matters. His works were translated into Latin, influencing European physicians and scholars throughout the Middle Ages. He was when we look at someone like Avicenna, who's Ibn Sina, he wrote the standard book of medicine that was used in Europe for 500 years. It was written by Ibn Sina, who is known as the Prince of Physicians and is remembered as quite possibly the greatest Muslim physician. His book, The Canon of Medicine, which contained over 1 million words, was translated first into Latin and used in European universities up until the 18th and 19th centuries as the standard medical text. All of this taught by Muslims. We have, in terms of not just healthcare in terms of medicine, but healthcare in terms of physically remaining clean and pure, which we're encouraging people nowadays to continually wash their hands to protect themselves against any diseases or any type of bacteria. Muslims, the wudu system has already overtaken anything anyway. But protecting and cleansing the body has always been a priority for Muslims. And for that reason, it's no surprise that Muslim scientists were the first to combine vegetable oils and sodium hydroxide and aromatics, which such as thyme oil, to create the first recipe for soap, which is still used today. Shampoo was introduced to England. It was here in the UK. It was introduced on the Brighton seafront in 1759 by something termed as Muhammad's Indian vapor baths. So a man from India who was named Muhammad, his vapor baths brought the first soap and shampoo into this country, and that was just 200 years ago. The fact that Europeans learnt the very basics of hygiene and cleanliness from Muslims just goes to show how much advancements Muslim had made in the past. Because of the cold weather, which still exists today, and it used to exist 100, 200, 300 years ago, even the rich and famous people who were of royalty never used to have baths. They never used to clean themselves. In fact, it's well reported and that that the stench of European cities was unbearable. People would throw their feces and their urine into the street outside, and that led to many outbreaks of diseases. I remember reading one of the monarchs would take orange peels, and I remember reading this in history, probably in school. They would take orange peels and put those orange peels underneath their armpits, and that was to block the smell that would emanate from their bodies, rather than having a bath or a shower or cleaning themselves. Whereas cleanliness is incumbent upon Muslims, and the 5 daily prayers cannot be performed without washing and being clean. So to go further than that, it was an Andalusian, who's a man by the name Abu Hassan Ali ibn Nafi, who first introduced underarm deodorants, and he improved detergents for washing clothes. It was it was Ibn Nafi, in fact, who was recognized as a social dynamo. He was an individual who reformed the Andalusian cuisine, and he was the one who suggested that tables should be covered with washable cloths, something that you find in fine dining here in the West. It began by Muslims. He was, in fact, among the first to order the food as it should be served. That the first you would have the starters in the soup, then you'd have the sauces next to the meats, and then at the end you'd have the desserts. And this multi-course serving became the standard not only in Muslim Islamic Spain, but the entire Western region as well. So there's so many contributions that we can be thankful for. There's so many advancements that Muslims have made throughout history. The Ottomans, we see the series Ertugrul and Kurulus Osman, and you see how the Ottoman Empire began with its faith and trust solely in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Afterwards, they made magnificent technological advances that were brought over to Western Europe, and then Muslims were forgotten. Everything that they performed, it was brushed under the carpet. Muslim astronomers, Ottoman astronomers, Taqiyuddin, a 16th century Ottoman astronomer, he created astronomical tables, observational instruments to view the moon. When we focus on observational data and astronomical data, when we start our prayers and when we start our months, that all came from Muslims. Muslims made magnificent strides in the fields of chemistry, inventing many of the basic processes and apparatuses that are used today still by modern day chemists. Even in the field of aviation, we have to thank Muslims. It was Ibn Firnas, a Muslim engineer of Andalusia, who wrote in the 9th century, he constructed a flying machine, thus becoming the world's first aviator. In 852, he jumped from the minaret of the Grand Mosque in Cordoba in Spain using a loose cloak that was stiffened together with wooden struts. And the first parachute is actually attributed to the design that he came out with. So Muslims are always at the forefront of trying to improve upon the technological and technical advancements of the age. And nowadays, we've completely forgotten that. It's as if we have taken a magnificent, huge step back. We can't rest on our laurels. When we look at, even today, Nobel Peace Prize winners or Nobel Award winners, I think out of all of them, there's only been 2 Muslim Nobel Peace Prize winners, and this is ridiculous. Why is that the case? Why is it that Muslim work that has been carried out is not often highlighted enough, and Muslims themselves, we ourselves, have forgotten the huge amounts of work that we've done in the past, and we don't take pride in that type of work, and it's as if we've forgotten it all. And it's important that first and foremost, the reason why I talk about these advancements and the contributions that we've contributed to the world is not so that we can look back and reminisce and say, oh, look how great Muslims were and look how far we have fallen. No. And nor is it my intention for us to feel that, oh, we were so great and we've done all of this and therefore, you know, Muslims are great and, you know, there's nothing more that we need to prove, that we need to accomplish. The reason why I'm saying this is because our religion always encourages us to improve, to progress further and further in every field, in every science. It's our job as the Khalifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon this earth, as the vicegerents of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon this earth, to improve its state, to take care of it. That's our job and that's our duty. And if we're not fulfilling our duty and our obligation, then there's something wrong. And as Muslims, we need to stand up. We need to pull up our socks and start and get working. We need to contribute to society so that non-Muslims and others, people like Sam Harris, who are anti-Islam activists, who are anti-Islam preachers, they don't raise a finger at us and say, well, look, what have you Muslims done? What have you achieved? This is supposed to give us an amount of honor, a certain amount of pride, that look, we have achieved this in the past. We've done this work and it's possible for us to do these kind of things again. So I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me and you tawfiq and the ability to act upon the teachings of the Quran, the noble sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. JazakAllah for watching. Please do continue to make dua. We all make dua collectively that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala improve the condition of our Muslim brothers and sisters throughout the world who are suffering from any type of illness, any type of persecution. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alleviate their pain and their suffering. And we pray for all of our Muslim brothers and sisters who have passed away, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them the highest of stages in Jannah, inshaAllah ta'ala. JazakAllah for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.